Hello, you're welcome to the podcast. My name is Michael Harding, and this is just an introduction. The full podcast will be available a little bit later this evening. What I wanted to share with you is a few little things. It's my birthday today, and I'm saying that today is the 6th of August, even though it's actually the 5th. Does that seem mad to you? Well, it's like I've just brought my birthday forward 24 hours. And so people who listen to this on Saturday will actually be getting it exactly on the date. But yeah, I was born 69 years ago. I'm very grateful that I was born. Apparently it was sudden. My father had just gone back to work at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and there was my mother in the house and a midwife, who was there to attend the birth. And by the time that the father got back into his office in Cavan Town, somebody was in after him, having got a phone call, or someone came in with a message on a bicycle, I'm not sure, to tell him that the baby was born. So it was like a real quick moment happened in the afternoon. And I've always taken that story as a sort of a mark of the kind of person I am, that I tend to do things, I wouldn't say rashly, but I love to go with the flow. I love to feel that, oh, this is the new idea, this is the new way to go, and just go and do it, you know. I do think, like, you never regret things you did in life, you'll always regret things you didn't do. And I give thanks, and I'm so grateful that at certain crucial times in my life, I did take the risk. You know, I do remember, for example, when I was a clergy man, when I was in the institution of the church, and this is 40 years ago maybe, 40, more than 40. I was 32 years of age at the time. So it's not 40, it's 35 years ago. Well, I was in a parish, and I wasn't happy because I felt the church was far more conservative than I had imagined, and I needed to move on, even though my faith was strong. But the institution didn't seem to fit well with me. And so I was talking to a fella. He was a kind of an advisor at the time, a counsellor, an older man than me by about 20 years, and he was very conservative. And I used to go to him because I thought it's good to have a relationship with somebody who has different politics than you have. If you go around in a bubble where, you know, you're asking advice from people who have all the same philosophical and political views as you have, you won't get much different than what you already think yourself. And because I was a very sort of liberal kind of person, this guy was really conservative, and so we were like oil and water, and 20 years difference between us. But I used to go to him, and I found him very helpful. Anyway, I told him the story. I said, I'm not happy in the whole system, and I think I should leave. You know, maybe next year I'll head off and go leave. And he said, well, I give you one bit of advice, Michael. I said, what's that? He said, don't leave it until next year. Go now, immediately. He said, because you're 32 years of age now, and if you put it off until you're 33, you'll then put it off until you're 35. And eventually, he said, you'll find yourself maybe 40, and you'll find you're too old to leave. You'll get set in your ways. And so I left the institution about, I would say, 6 weeks later, all done and dusted. And I'm so grateful I did that. I feel that not only did it open up the full possibility of being a full-time writer to me, but it actually deepened my faith. It allowed me to go into a desert, a place of vulnerability, a place where I didn't know what I believed. And then gradually, one accident after another, I began to feel I was being led in life in a particular way. And another time I made a kind of a sudden or quick decision, and some people would say impetuous, but I don't think so. That was, well, if I left the institutional church in 1984, it was about 7 years later that I walked in the door of Jampaling, Tibetan Buddhist Center in West Cavan. And again, I didn't sort of dally around with the question of Buddhist practice. I went in and tried to make contact with the Lama who was there, and I said, I want to take refuge in the Lama, in the Rinpoche, and I want to study Buddhism properly. And again, it was such a joyful thing looking back. I'm so grateful that happened. And it became another turning point in my life, because I was 40, and for 5 years afterwards I didn't drink, I didn't smoke. I worked really hard trying to stay close to my teacher and learn from him and meditate and read various books. And I went to his monastery in India, and I went to Mongolia with him for a retreat where we toured. We went across the whole length of Mongolia. Well, not the whole length of it, but definitely about 2,000 miles traveling in jeeps through the mountains and the deserts of Mongolia. These were blessings. These were moments that I feel so grateful for. And yet they all happened at the drop of a hat. And that's what I'm thinking about this morning. There was another time, and you'll know this because I talk about it regularly, and that's the moment when my beloved returned from having been away for a year working in the museum in Warsaw, and she brought with her a gift, and the gift was an icon of Kazan, the mother of God of Kazan. And she gave it to me as a gift, but the minute I took it in my hand, I said, this is what I must do now. I must return to the Christian practice and practice this faith that I have in my heart. And I did. And that was 2016. And again, it was an immediate, impetuous decision as she handed it over to me. We were sitting on the patio. She just handed it, said, this is a gift. It's a little gift from Warsaw. And I opened the box, and I immediately dedicated myself to the Mother of God. I said, for the next year, I will use this icon as my meditative practice to pray. And that was an amazing thing, because I didn't realize I was heading into ill health, heading into a heart attack, detached retina, 2 operations on the back, loads of stuff for about 4 or 5 years. And what a life raft that icon was, and what a support my faith was. And that's really why these podcasts go in the direction that they go. When I began doing the podcast, I thought, I'll be talking about creative writing and how to write memoirs and the art of memoir and so forth. But again and again, I find myself passionately wanting to share the story of my own faith and the story of how that icon transformed my life. I often talk about a wonderful icon painter, Yuri Podolin, I think his name was, and he was a friend when I was in Warsaw, a friend of Kathy, my beloved, and says to me one time, he said, when you take an icon into the house, first it will change you, then it will change everybody in the house, and then it will change even your neighbours. And there's another phrase they use about icons, they talk about an icon appearing. They, I mean, those who live in the Orthodox tradition and write books that I do read. That's the way I mean that. But in their tradition, there's a beautiful sense of an icon appearing. And it sounds magic in a trivial way, but it's not. It's deeper than the triviality of superstition or magic. It's a way of using language poetically to get to a deeper truth. So, if I say, the beloved came back from Warsaw and she had a gift for me, and I opened the box and it was an icon, that's historically accurate. But if I say that one evening on the patio, when the beloved had returned from Warsaw, an icon appeared in my life, that is also, and in fact more deeply true. Because it's recognizing that what happens in the kind of cause and effect of ordinary life has behind it a sort of ground of being, a form or aesthetic shape that is in itself the meaning of everything. The very unfolding of the universe is its own meaning. This is what is. And when you awaken to that sense of meaning in the universe, you begin to use a deeper, more profound, poetic language. You begin to say things like the icon appeared, or if something happens in your life, you begin to see it more as a message. Might be somebody who contacts you out of the blue and says something to you, or it might be a moment where you're walking along a street on your holidays and you hear a bell far away in another street, and you go down the old cobbled pathway and find there's an old ancient church and the bell is ringing, and you go inside and you have beautiful thoughts about your life or your loved ones or whatever. And there are no accidents. That even in the almost casual nature of cause and effect, there is a form revealing itself. And it's not that the form of the universe is separate from you. Like, you're not this little bubble of separated consciousness that's, in this armchair watching the universe evolve around you. You are actually the universe. And your evolution and your awakening is the awakening of the universe. And nobody says that more beautifully than Rumi when he says, you are not the ocean, you are the wave. So in the wave you can see the form, you can name it or point at it and say, look at the wave, but actually the wave is just a form by which the ocean at that moment is expressing itself. And you and me are just a form in which the ocean, the ocean, the cosmos itself, is expressing itself. And that leads us to the whole sense of whether that's just me, or is that me and somebody else? If I talk about myself as receiving gifts, something happens and somebody gives me something and it changes my life, and it's like, well, that's a gift. Or I feel a kind of a sense that I want to go and do a retreat, and I use words like I feel I'm being called. You know, I have a vocation to go, and there's something calling me to do this. All those senses of how we respond to our ordinary life, when we begin to talk about them as gift, receiving gifts, being grateful for gifts, we're implying that there is some sort of otherness. And where things fall down is when we kind of fall into old-fashioned ways of thinking about this. So we start thinking in terms of a closed universe and a God who is on the outside. And in the podcast that I'm doing right now, and in the one that is going to come after this one, for Friday the 5th, 6th of August, this weekend, I'm trying to share an image that sort of takes away this way of thinking about God. And the image I use is a canister. So you'll hear me in the next podcast talking a lot about the canister, and I'm going to try to explain it just now. Well, I actually got this from a short story by Beckett, believe it or not. Beckett had this wonderful short story that I read decades ago, and I don't know where it is in his work, but it was like about these figures, these creatures, humans who were stuck in a big canister. There was 2 stories to it, but it was like a round tower, and they were on the inside of it, if you like, and they couldn't get out. And they're just trapped inside, and some of them believe there's a way out. And some of them believe that somebody outside has put them all inside. They can't remember how they got there, but they're stuck in this canister, this enclosed space. It's very big because there's a lot of them in it, and they can live existentially. They don't have to eat or drink, it's just to live. But they're stuck in a canister. And some of them have theories that if you tap certain codes on the wall, that the people outside might hear you and they'd come and rescue you. And others have theories that if you could make a ladder and get up to the top floor of the canister, you'd find that there was a trap door in the very top. And you get out that way. And they live believing these things, but they just can't get out and they don't know. And this was like, I presume, a kind of a metaphor for existential living in a secular world where the universe is a closed space and there ain't no getting out of this, you know. And this is a very, very popular way in Western culture to live now. To live with a sense that we are enclosed. And that's where I begin to use this metaphor of a canister. It's like, you know, to believe is an old-fashioned thing, people think. And so they dispose of their faith. They dispose of faith practice. And they end up kind of feeling, without necessarily ever examining it, but that life is this quite terrible existential condition of just being trapped in this reality, and that, you know, science explains how we got here. Science explains what happens when we die, which is basically that we go nowhere. It's all over. It's just, we're a body. We're a body. The body gets old and it dies and goes into the ground and that sort of thing. And they would be the most plausible ways of thinking about human existence. But it's the canister feels like an enclosed space, and the reason why we dismiss the idea of God is because we consider the idea of God within the context of this image. So therefore, when we say to ourselves, well, let's imagine there's a God, so we think, well, God is some sort of person or people outside the canister who may or may not be able to hear us. And that whole shape of how we think about our existence is fundamentally different from faith experience. Faith experience is not to say, that we live on the surface like in a canister, and that on the other side of the veil or on the other side of the wall there is a God who has ability to change the levers, and that some day we're going to find a door out of this reality into some other reality. Faith experience is about now, in this moment, feeling God is in everything, is keeping everything alive, that what we experience is God, is the face of God. And that's really the kind of fundamental thing I want to talk about this weekend. To move away from ideas where we hold on to this world as some sort of empirical reality, like it's life in a canister and we don't know what's going on outside, and to think that there's somebody outside like a God looking at us or hearing us. That's all silly, right? So that's the template I want to get rid of. And the template I want to think about is what Rumi says. It's more like you are not the ocean, but you are the wave. That you are God. You are God in the process of surfacing in this cosmos. And the only way to get into that space is to be here now, is to try little practices, whether they be Christian, Jewish, Buddhist, Hindu, whatever, Islam. Try little practices that bring you into the present moment. And try mindfulness, but also try prayer. Go back to your own tradition and go back to your own old-fashioned prayers and pick one of them and actually practice it. And you will find that it brings you into the present moment. You'll realize that it doesn't just do what you thought it did, which was like saying a rhyme, like a nursery rhyme. Say, Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. That's just a rhyme. And you think, oh, we used to do that when we were young because we thought there was a God, but now I've grown up and we know there's no God. There's just this sort of empirical reality. This is it. There's science. That explains everything. End of story. And yet you're living maybe with anxiety. You're living with worries. You're living with, concern about the shortness of life and what you're going to do as you get older. All those things that we worry about, like our children, our parents, our families, our loved ones. All the things we worry about. And then we try mindfulness. And what I'm saying is, if you take an old-fashioned prayer, like we'll say the Hail Mary, and you say the prayer, and try and mindfully say the prayer, try and, breathe, relax, become aware of your body, become physically still, keep your back straight. And now intone the prayer. It's like incantation. You're speaking the words of the prayer like you're a performer, like you're an actor. And the first thing you realize is it's quite easy to do, and it conjures up an idea or a sense of Mary's presence. If you take a monologue out of a poem, or if you take a monologue out of a play by Shakespeare, and you recite it like I'm saying to recite it, you can see very easy that the more you embody the words, the more you conjure into your presence the other character. So that happens in theatre all the time. Otherwise you wouldn't be able to act. But it also happens in prayer. Because prayer, you're Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee, blessed art thou. If you do that like a meditation, very slowly, just one single prayer, one single round, do it one single time. It's amazing because you find, and even think about yourself as an actor. Imagine you're an actor. Like, imagine I'm the director and I say, I want you now to act out that sentence. And you look, and the sentence is, Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. So you do this, okay. What happens is, you will find that you very quickly conjure up an idea of Mary. And an idea of you as an ego speaking to Mary. Now, if you stay with that after you've finished saying the words of the prayer and you say nothing for, let's say, 3 minutes, and you have the clock ticking so that you know it's going to be 3 minutes, and you just stay in the silence, you'll become, number one, deeply aware of your breathing, of your physical posture, because you're not moving your body, you're keeping it still. You become deeply aware of your body, deeply aware of your mind. Even if there are thoughts flowing through, you'll be aware of them. If you suddenly start thinking, I have to go to Mullingar this afternoon, you'll be kind of aware, I want to stop that, I shouldn't be thinking about that, I'm trying to think about this, just be here now. But to be here now in a prayerful way gives you this sense of the otherness of presence, the otherness of, it's like you've mythologized it into Mary, the Mother of God, before you, let's say. And there's a further step you can go, which is to actually become aware of everything around you as the presence of Mary. So that instead of being present in a room as I am now and feeling that I'm kind of conjuring up a ghostly image of Mary as one would imagine her from images, that's something that the early Christians used to say was not a good idea. Like, they would say it was a really bad idea to have images of, let's say, Jesus in your prayer. And you can see why, at a certain stage in the Christian tradition, there was this period of iconoclasm, where they kind of broke all the icons, all the amazing icons that have been made over a few hundred years. They smashed every one of them, because they decided that this is really a bad direction to be going in, where you're kind of visualizing God, Emmanuel, Jesus Christ, Mary, the Mother of God, all these people we've been talking about, and then you start sort of trying to imagine them. This is crazy, because they don't manifest like that. The way to experience the face of God is in everything that you look at. It doesn't need a separate image. It only needs the trees and the mountain and the lake. It only needs the rafters in the shed that I'm sitting in, and the window and the walls and the floor and the furniture. Everything is tingling with life, with being, with energy. Everything is a manifestation of God. If you were saying the Hail Mary, then everything is a manifestation of the Mother. The Divine Mother, the motherly God, as Julian of Norwich speaks about the face of God, the motherliness of God. And to kind of bring that further, you get people like Teilhard de Chardin, who talks about the cosmic Christ, and that's a really big idea, which I'm not going to go into, but just a simple one would be old Father Lazarus, that lovely Coptic monk in the deserts of Egypt. You'd see him on YouTube, and he talks about when he prays to Mary, and he's in his little cave in the mountain. He says it feels, I feel I am in the womb of Mary. The womb of Mary. So it's like, that allows him to kind of experience the little cave and the mountain and the desert around him as the deeply present, or deeply presence, the deeply present God, in the presence of Mary coming present to him, not as a kind of an extrapolated image of Mary, but actually as the very things he touches in the cave. His feet walking on the earth, walking, as John Moriarty would say, walking beautifully on the earth. So let me recap. Let me go back on all this. And I'm doing this podcast as a preparation for the next one, because in the next one I'm trying to talk more about the sense of getting away from the templates with which we create and conjure up ideas of God, or of his saints, or of aspects of God. And firstly, I use the idea of a canister, that we're all enclosed in this canister of realism and empiricism, and that's like living some sort of, we can't get out, but there might be something on the outside. That's the template we live in modernity, and the conjecturing that there is nothing on the outside of that canister is absurd, but also the idea that there is something on the outside, that there's some sort of weird old man with a big long white beard on the outside of the canister looking in at us. That's also not a great idea. So that template you try and get rid of. And then you try and think of the lovely idea of the ocean and the wave. And you say, you're not the ocean, you are the wave. You are actually, who you think you are is just a form of the ocean. And that's the way to think about God. That's how close God is to you. Your form, your very form, is actually just the expression of God in this moment, in the space that you are in. You are the wave of the ocean, and God is the ocean. And then finally in this podcast, question arises, how can I reactivate traditional faith practice to enter into this moment? And whether you are Jewish, Muslim, Christian, Hindu, Buddhist, all religious traditions will have a prayer and a prayer pathway. And what I'm suggesting is that you return to your original, be it Muslim, Buddhist, whatever, Christian. In my terms, Christian, and therefore I'm given the example from Christianity. But it works in any religion. What I'm saying is that you return to whatever are the techniques of prayer as you learned them as a child. And you take the simplest one you can, not even a rosary, not even 3 Hail Marys. You take one single prayer. Might be the Our Father, for example, or it might be Hail Mary, whatever. And you physically get yourself into the same repose as you would if you were doing mindful practices in a secular way. And you then intone the prayer. Whisper it. Do more than just say it with your mind mentally. Move your lips, even silently, as an actor would, to say, Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women. Blessed is the fruit of your womb. And then hold that stillness, becoming aware of your breath, aware of your body's stillness, being there for 3 minutes. And then say the second part of that little prayer, which is, Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now, and at the hour of our death. There's two very key things and profound in that last sentence. Invoking Mary to give you support at the hour of your death, and then linking that to now, which is be here now and at the hour of your death. Be here now. And then in the now, you're opening up a sense of contemplating, the sense of your last moments. That's a really, really big idea. So you do that in a very simple way, and you experience yourself in the silence becoming mindful in the normal way that you become mindful, which is usually just becoming aware of the distracted thoughts that are flying through your head. But you're also aware of Mary, and rather than then sort of having kind of visualizations, and this is a hugely important thing, this is why iconoclastic tradition happened, this is why in Islam they said, let's have no images whatsoever. Let's have no image. The images are distracting us from the present moment and the surrender in the present moment to the power of Allah. So let's have no images. So therefore, in this little practice that I'm suggesting to you, don't end up with some sort of nefarious image of Mary, because that's using the canister template of reality. That's the idea that, like, there's a surface reality. You know, we live in this real world, and then I start to visualize God as if it was about spirits and ghosts and things that come through walls. But to believe in God is to actually simply accept the beauty of the sunset, accept the beauty of your beloved, accept the world as it is to accept the face of God. And so in this incantation, where you're saying words like an actor, where you're saying the prayer like whispering it with your lips, but you're not trying to, imagine somebody like yourself. You're actually becoming more and more aware of the reality which is around you, the room that you're in, the space that you're in, as being deeper than just what is on the surface, and in fact being in itself the real presence of the ultimate beloved, which is the God. Eloquently described maybe as the womb of Mary, or that you're in the arms of Mary, or you're in the gaze of Mary, that as light fills the room, so the light of her gaze fills your heart. And I give you one more little idea in this meditation, and that is to do with, the way we talk about, it's a modern idea we use nowadays that God is in my heart. I always remember, I don't want to get distracted now, but I always remember the very first time that I met kind of charismatic, born-again Jesus people. There were young hippies on O'Connell Street, and they were so beautiful. You know, there were young women, long hair, patchouli oil, long cheesecloth dresses down to their sandaled feet. I just wanted to go away with them immediately. And they stopped me and they said, "Do you have Jesus in your heart?" Now, because I was coming from the kind of devotional adolescence that I had, I said, "Yeah, I do." And we became friends. But there is that expression that, you know, you have Jesus in your heart, or you have God in your heart, and it's a way of sort of getting a distance from the old-fashioned imaging of God. So God becomes, in some sense, an emotion in you. And it does work. And it has great roots, particularly in the story where Jesus says, you know, go into the room that's in your heart. Close the door. Speak to your Father who is there, and your Father will hear you. That's a very, very powerful, beautiful little idea that's very relevant to modern meditation. To be here now in your heart, knowing. And going into the heart, that journey, you get it in Islam and you get it in Orthodox Christianity. In Orthodox Christianity, they talk about the nous, that wisdom of the heart, knowing with the heart, and moving from the head down into the heart. And in Islam, they also say things like, the longest spiritual journey is the 18 inches from your brain to your heart. That's the journey. That's the great spiritual journey you'll ever make. So having Jesus in your heart, having God, the Allah in your heart, Buddha, the word is bodhicitta, you know, the awakening compassion, which is to love with the heart, and so many exercises in Buddhism too have this sense of visualizing the heart as the center where the awakening mind happens. You know, if you ever see somebody prostrating in a Buddhist temple or in a Tibetan particularly, so all I know about is be a Tibetan Buddhist center, but the prostration involves putting the two hands together on the top of the head. And the next move, you bring the two hands down to just below your chin, so around your throat. And the final one is to a position where your heart is, in the chest. And those are the three places that you move your joined hands, from the top to the throat to the heart, and as you do the prostration. And they actually refer to, because when you put yourself flat on the floor in this Buddhist prostration, you are taking refuge, as you're physically expressing that you want to take refuge in the Buddha. But you're taking refuge at three different levels, and that is at the level of the body, the speech, and the heart. So that with the body, you will do no harm. With your speech, you will do no harm. With your heart, you will do no harm. And on the top of the head, where the hands join, indicates the body, because you're touching the crown pinnacle, and that's the body. And then the next one is speech, where you're just on the throat, the larynx. You're taking refuge. You're giving your speech, saying, I do no harm. And then finally, and this is the one I'm coming to, when you put your joined hands on the heart, that's where you're expressing that your mind will be taking refuge, or with your mind you take refuge in the Buddha. So do you see how the actual heart is called the mind in Buddhism? They don't refer to the head as the mind, they refer to the heart. And there you have it. Buddhist, Orthodox, Muslim, all having that same single insight to bring your mind into your heart. So it's very, very sensible to think about in prayer that, you're trying to have a sort of an idea of Mary or Jesus or whoever, and it's like you feel them in your heart. You try and open your heart to them as a metaphor. Now, there's another way of doing that, and that is not where you feel God is in your heart, but that you are in the heart of God. Not that Mary is in your heart, but that you are in the womb of Mary. And then you begin to see the cosmic dimension of prayerfulness, like with Christ or with Mary or with anybody else, that in some sense you begin to see yourself within them. Well, if you're within them, then the whole environment around you becomes alive, becomes tingling with sacramental presence. These thoughts I share with you for a number of reasons, I suppose, because it is the 6th of August, it's my birthday. They're private, rambling, joyful reflections on how you can turn mindfulness into prayerfulness. And also because I'm going to do, I've already set up, the second podcast for this 6th of August, which holds on to this idea of that canister as an idea. It's a kind of a lot of ideas I'm trying to share with you in the second podcast. I hope that you enjoy, and I hope that you are having a wonderful weekend, wonderful August, wonderful transfiguration. And most importantly, I hope you're here, in your own here and now. Thank you for being here. Bye-bye.